When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, with the prayers of the saints, ascended before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. And there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain, burning with fire, was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood. And a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water, because it was made bitter. Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. And I looked, and I heard an angel, flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpets of the 3 angels who are about to sound. So now the 7th seal is opened, and it says there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Now, it doesn't explain how long a half an hour is in earthly time, or in our time, but there is a period of time where heaven and earth is in peace. There are no disasters happening, nothing's going on. On earth, people are recovering from the asteroids and the earthquake, and they're preparing for the next 7 trumpets that are about to sound. Now, these are not the trumpets that is talked about in 1 Corinthians, where it says they'll be caught up in the last trump in the blinking of an eye. That trumpet that he's talking about in 1 Corinthians is an example of the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, High Holy Holidays cycle, the Feast of Trumpets. The last trumpet of the Feast of Trumpets signifies the rapture. And we see that the rapture takes place during Revelation 6, verse 12. These trumpets that are about to sound, these next 7 trumpets, are trumpets that signify or give a signal to what will happen on the earth. These trumpets that sound off proclaim what is going to happen to the earth. So the 7 angels are given these 7 trumpets in preparation for the disasters that will happen on the earth. And then another angel has a golden censer, and he stands at the altar. What is a censer? A censer is a container in which incense is burned. So the thing that holds incense is like, you ever see those little sticks that they burn and it makes smoke and it smells? A censer is a container that holds incense. And it says he was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. So the prayers of the saints mix with the incense. And when it says saints, the saints are just Christians. The prayers are mixed with the incense of heaven, and it ascends before God from the angel's hands. And so he takes the censer and fills it with fire from the altar, and then he throws it to the earth. So why does he take the prayers and the incense? Why does he mix it with fire? Well, the fire comes from the altar. And if we refer back to Revelation 6 verse 9, when Jesus opens the 5th seal, it shows that at the altar, under the altar, the souls who had been killed for having the word of God and for spreading his word, they were looking for vengeance and justice. So the fire that's on the altar is mixed in with the prayers of those that are seeking justice. But it's mixed in with this fire to show punishment to the earth. So because it was mixed with fire and thrown to the earth, this becomes the signal to the angels to begin sounding off in their trumpets, to give the signal of these next punishments, these next disasters that will come onto the earth. So now the first trumpet sounds off, and we see a hailstorm. And the hail is followed by fire, and it's mingled with blood. Now this is a callback to Exodus 9 verse 23, where Moses was delivering the plagues to Egypt. It says, Moses stretched out his staff toward the sky, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire ran down to the earth. And the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So the hail comes with fire. The hail is not like an ordinary hail that is ice balls. It's ice that's on fire. Hailstones that are on fire. And it causes a third of the earth's trees and green grass to be burned up. So this storm, this hailstorm, this plague happens all around the earth. Now, it also says it's mingled with blood. And the blood represents the martyred Christians that were under the altar. Then after this happens, the second trumpet sounds, and it says, a mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. The best that we can understand a mountain coming out of the sky is that it's a giant asteroid, and it crashes into the sea, or into a sea in the Mediterranean, or somewhere around the area of near Israel. And when it crashes into the water, it turns the water into blood. And because of this, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. This also has me believing that it's in a large body of water like the Mediterranean Sea, because you're going to have a lot of seafaring traffic, a lot of ships and boats going to and fro in a heavy trafficked area. But even so, a third of the ships were destroyed, and this could definitely be by the explosion that the asteroid causes when it impacts, and also the tidal wave that it creates. All the ships will be turned over and destroyed and would sink to the bottom of the sea. So an asteroid comes down and crashes into the ocean, and it kills a third of the sea creatures, and it destroys a third of the boats and ships, and turns all the water into blood. Now, after this, the third angel is sounding his trumpet, and it says, a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on the third of the rivers and on the springs of waters. It's saying that a star burning like a torch fell on the waters. Now, in ancient times, before people knew how to describe these things, a comet was like a star. People thought a comet was a star, and a comet's trail looked like a long flame or a torch. If you look at a torch, you see a high flame, and with a comet, it would seem like a star with a long flame or a torch. So it's saying that a star burning like a torch fell from the sky. And we can infer this to mean that a comet falls on the earth. And where does it fall? It says it falls on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. So rivers and spring water are examples of fresh water where it's not salinated, there's no salt. You have the ocean is very salty, but rivers and spring waters have no salt in them. This is the water that people are able to drink naturally. It's drinkable water. So the comet crashes into the earth, and the effect it has is on fresh water, drinkable water that people need to live and survive. And because of this, it says that it turns a third of the waters into wormwood. Wormwood is a type of plant that is bitter to eat. But even though it's saying that it's bitter, it's saying that it is much more dangerous than just being bitter. It's saying that people died from drinking the water. So we know that bitter must mean something else. It's not that it's bitter to drink. It means that the water becomes toxic because the comet crashed into the reservoir of waters and spring waters and rivers, where now the water is undrinkable. It became toxic to people to drink. So they give the comet the name wormwood, which describes how it affected the waters and made the water toxic and unsafe to drink. So a third of the water in that area where the comet crashed into becomes undrinkable. This will be important to remember when later events happen in Revelation, and I'll refer back to this when we get there. Now the fourth angel sounds off his trumpet, and it says, "And a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night." So what we see here is examples that reference objects of time. The sun, the moon, and the stars are used to create measurements of time. So by looking at the position of the sun and the moon and the stars, they can know what time of day it is. They can know what time of the year it is. This is how early people started to figure out time and how to measure time. So when it's talking about a third of the moon and a third of the stars, and a third of them were darkened, and it didn't shine, and likewise the night, it's saying that the day and the night cycle is shortened by a third of the day. So we have 24 hours in a day. You would shorten that time by 1/3. So if the math is correct, you would divide 24 into 3 and you will get 8. So 24 hours would be shortened into 8 hours. The day and the night cycle would be 8 hours. So you would have 4 hours in the daytime and 4 hours for nighttime. This is the thing that Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24, verse 22, where he says, "If those days had not been cut short, nobody would be saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened." He's saying that it's going to be a time that is very difficult to endure, that many people will not be able to handle it unless time was shortened. And so he's saying he's shortening it for his people, for the elect. And who are the elect? When you read Revelation, you'll see that the elect are the ones that he has singled out and saves, which would be the 144,000 Jews from the 12 tribes. Those are his elect. But also his elect are also the left behind Christians that passed the testing of the hour of trial, the ones that were martyred and did not get the mark of the beast. The elect are his people, Jesus's people that he comes to save at the end of the hour of trial. That time period I call is the harvest, because when he comes to pick up his people at the end of the hour of trial, it says in Revelation 14 verse 15, "Thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." The end of the hour of trial is termed as the harvest. And for the sake of Jesus's elect, the 144,000 Jewish people and the Christians who passed the testing of the hour of trial by not getting the mark, they are the ones that will be taken up by Jesus in a very similar fashion to the rapture that happened before the hour of trial. But we'll get into that when we get to those chapters. Now, after the time becomes shortened, it tells us that the angel is flying in the midst of heaven, saying, "Woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpets of the 3 angels who are about to sound." What this verse indicates is that the worst is yet to come.